And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show, ladies and gentlemen. And joining us now is Doug Holtz, Eakin, the former director of the CBO, which, of course, is the Congressional Budget Office, and president of the American Action Forum. Hello, Doug. Good to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me on.
It's always my pleasure. All right. So, first of all, let's for those who don't know, for the uninitiated, as they say, the CBO. The CBO is nonpartisan. Explain what it does and how it operates.
The CBO works for the Congress. It is essentially Congress's think tank and has two big jobs in that regard. It puts out studies on topics that Congress is interested in. Most recently, one on the minimum wage that got a lot of attention, but they do lots of studies for Congress. And then their core business is they evaluate the federal budget cost of every bill that goes through the Congress. And so they calculate what tax revenues will come in, what spending will go out, and thus the impacts on the budget. And in doing that work, the law says they must be nonpartisan and not make policy recommendations. So they answer Congress's questions, but they don't tell it what to do.
All right. So in recent days, the administration has gotten two reports from the CBO, and of course they've tried to spin them after the fact, but neither one of them are very good. Let's work in reverse order. Let's go with the most recent first, and that was an analysis of the possible raise in a minimum wage, a federal minimum wage, to $10.10 an hour, showing the loss of about 500,000 jobs over time. How would you guys, how would the CBO go about taking that issue on?
The first thing they would do is they would go out and read all of the existing research literature on increases in the minimum wage and what we've learned from past federal increases, what we've learned from various states that have increased their minimum wage, and they would, as a result, try to find the impacts on the employment, and they came up with a central estimate of about 500,000 jobs. Those would be concentrated among the low-skilled, low-wage workers in the United States. And then they would try to trace through the implications of that for the budget and the implications for those people, who wins, who loses. And that's exactly what the report did.
Right, and of course the White House, and I guess every White House would try to spin a CBO report in their own favor. But I found it very amusing that when Jay Carney, for instance, tried to spin it, he left out completely any reference to the loss of jobs and talked about how encouraged he was that guess what? If you raise the minimum wage, people would make more money. Well, duh. Most economists will tell you, and most small business owners will tell you, and most large business owners will tell you, if you got to pay your employees more, it's going to result in higher prices for your product eventually passed on to the consumer, and it's going to result in possibly cutting back people's hours or laying people off.
Yeah, I thought the report was utterly unsurprising. I mean, this is exactly what you would expect. It hits a population that I think really needs more help, not more hurdles, because we're coming out of a very slow recovery. It's been hardest on the young and low-skilled workers, and this will be a bad news story for them. I thought the report did two other things that were actually very valuable. Number one, it showed quite clearly that this is just redistribution through another means. It showed the winners and losers. If you're above 6 times the federal poverty line, you lose. If you're below, in various stages, your wage income goes up. But then the third and most important thing it does is it says, this doesn't really help poverty, because of the $31 billion that goes to the low-wage workers, only 19% of them are poor. And that's the problem with the minimum wage in the way the White House wants to spin it. Yes, you can raise people's wages, but it's not targeted on poverty. And as a result, you're not solving the problem you claim you're interested in.
Right. And when they also said that I think 16 million people would see their wages go up, that's, and then, but yet we always often hear about how, only young people are on minimum wage for the most part, or the overwhelming majority, college students, et cetera. I believe, though, wrapped up in the raise to $10.10 would be people who are currently above the minimum wage and would get that bump, and people whose wages would increase because the minimum wage would increase. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I think, one of the very odd things about this is it does help the wrong people and also hurts the wrong people. If you think about it, you've got somebody who's low-skilled, they're out of work, you raise the minimum wage, and instead of them getting a job, someone who has a job sees their wages go up. What that really means is we took the opportunity for the out-of-work person to get a job and earn something and transfer that income to the person that has a job. That's a pretty peculiar way to try to help the people at the bottom end.
Yeah, I would say so. All right, and then the other report about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks by now, on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, talking about how it would provide a disincentive for people to work, and as a result, you would lose, I think, 2.5 million jobs. And the administration tried to say, oh no, that's not what it's saying. But then the head of the CBO testified the next day and said, no, here's exactly what it's saying. It provides a disincentive for people to work. And then the Democrats started spinning how great that is. Oh, people will be able to get health care. They won't have to stay on their job for health care. They could play with their grandchildren. They could play with their kids. They could go start a business or learn guitar. And you know, I heard somebody say it, and I think it's absolutely true. Until that day, I believe everything we've ever done in this country and everything that's ever been said about work was that it was a good thing, and it's something we should strive for, and it's something that gives people worth and value and meaning in their lives. And on that day, to the left, it changed.
Yeah, I found that a very disturbing line of reasoning. The first being they tried to cloak it in some academic dignity by saying this is solving a problem called job lock. As it turns out, I wrote papers on job lock back in the 90s when it was considered an issue about whether people could change jobs without fear of losing their insurance or seeing their premiums rise dramatically. And there is no job lock in the Affordable Care Act. You're by law required to have insurance, so you couldn't possibly be worried about losing your insurance. This is a different issue. This is we're paying people to retire.
Yeah.
And it's fine if people want to retire, but they shouldn't be doing it on my dime. And we should be rewarding work. We have people, 13% of the population that's out of work or under employed, and that's the problem. We want more work, not less.
No, absolutely, and for so many varied reasons. Obamacare, and let's just talk now. Now let's talk your opinion here. Joe Biden recently lowered expectations that they're not going to get the 7 million that they were aiming for. But hey, even 3 or 4 million—that's a heck of a start. I mean, the truth is, as even reported by the New York Times, when they talk about enrollment, first of all, enrollment, the analysis of the numbers in January compared to December that I saw showed it was a disappointment. It covered 5 weeks instead of 4, and the rate of growth was much slower than it was in December. And that aside, people who are so quote unquote signed up, the New York Times admits that at least 25% of them, although the government hasn't told them this, they won't tell us, at least 25% by insurance company estimates haven't paid a premium. So if you don't pay a premium, it's in your shopping cart, you're not signed up. The whole thing is it's a joke.
The sign-up's been a disaster, and you're exactly right that there's a big gap between the kinds of numbers you hear them advertise, 60 million visits to the website, and people who actually pick a policy, pay for it, and thus effectively sign up. Given the fact that they just don't tell us much, it's impossible to know where we are really, but they're not going to get to the 7 million they promised originally, and worse, it's quite clear that the young, healthy population is not signing up. They were always going to be a tough sell.
Well, Michelle Obama called them knuckleheads yesterday on Leno. That's a good way to get them to sign up.
Yeah, I missed that. Gee, well, praise is always it's. Yeah. The young like to be praised. That's great.
Yeah, and then she said if you cut your finger, since you're learning to cook, and you youngsters, and if you fall off a bar while you're dancing, that's how she pictures and portrays young people over 24, she said. As I've mentioned to others on the show today and all over throughout the weeks, they might cut their finger, have to go get stitched up, and then they'll get a bill for the full amount, and they'll call back and say, but I'm covered. And they'll say, no, you're not. You're covered, but you got a deductible. And they'll say, what the heck's a deductible? I mean, they don't know what deductibles are, and they're not being told.
No, there's an enormous amount of education that's going to be required, but I'd say that they have two problems. One is the way you sign up. The healthcare.gov website's been a disaster, but the policy itself is fundamentally flawed, and the subsidies that deter work, the subsidies that are tilted toward the older and sicker are pulling them into the so-called exchanges, and the younger aren't in there. That doesn't work as an insurance matter, and so this is going to become more, not less costly. I don't see a real good future for this, given what we know at the moment.
All right, Doug, I thank you very much for your time, sir. Thank you. Fascinating conversation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Doug Holtz Eakin, ladies and gentlemen, former director of the CBO and president of the American Action Forum, right here. And when we come back, we'll be joined by, well, you're going to want to hear this, Jonathan Tobin. You won't believe who Obama appointed and where he appointed him to. On the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax Television.